Did you know that every year thousands of people go missing and many of these cases remain unsolved? Some vanish without a trace, leaving families and communities in despair. But what if you managed to escape? What if, against all odds, you survived? One of the most haunting disappearances in recent history is that of Kara Robinson, but unlike most victims, Kara's story takes a remarkable turn. What really happened that day, and how did a young girl defy her captor? Stick around as we dive deep into this chilling mystery. Kara Robinson was just 15 years old when she vanished without a trace on a hot summer day in 2007. Her disappearance grabbed headlines, not just because she was a young girl with her entire life ahead of her, but because of the strange and terrifying events that followed. Kara wasn't just any victim. Her story is filled with shocking twists that left an entire community shaken and investigators racing against time. Kara's story also lingers in the minds of many for another reason: how she escaped from the clutches of a serial abductor. But before we get to that, let's take a closer look at who Kara was and the events that led to that fateful summer day. Kara Robinson was like any typical teenager, full of life, caring and always eager to lend a helping hand. She was babysitting her younger siblings on June 24, 2007, in Columbia, South Carolina. It was an ordinary day, hot and sunny.
We woke up that morning and it was kind of like, what are we going to do today? And we thought that it might be a good idea to go to the lake. My friend called her mother to ask if there was anything that she needed to do before we left the house. And her mom said, yeah, I just need you guys to water the flowers before you leave. And that's pretty much it. Since Heather had to go take a shower, I went and watered the flowers for her.
The kind of day where nothing seemed out of the ordinary. But for Kara, everything was about to change. While Kara was standing outside her house, a man approached her. He claimed he needed help with something in his car, a request that seemed harmless at first.
So I was watering the flowers, I hadn't even gotten dressed to go. I was still in pajamas basically. So a t-shirt and some shorts. And I noticed a car drive by. I noticed it going out of the neighborhood. And then very quickly, I noticed the car coming back into the neighborhood.
But what happened next was nothing short of every parent's nightmare.
It pulled into the driveway and the car parked and a guy got out and he was just wearing a button-down shirt that was tucked in and a baseball cap. Nice looking guy. And so he came over to me and he said, I have some magazines and I saw you outside and so I wanted to give these to you. Is your mom or dad home? And I said, no, this is not my house, it's my friend Heather's house. And he said, okay, well, what about her mom? Is her mom here? I said, no, she's not here right now. He was like, okay, well, I can just give them to you. You can just leave them for her. I said, okay, I'll take those and I'll just set them inside for her.
Within moments, Kara found herself being forced into his car, a blue van, which would later become a crucial clue in the investigation.
He kind of entered my personal space and was like, okay, this feels a little awkward. But then again, he was handing me something. And he came to hand me the brochures with his left hand.
And with his right hand,
he came with a handgun and put it to the side of my neck.
This was no random act of violence. The man had been watching, waiting for the perfect moment. And now,
there was no question in my mind that I had to do what he said because he was bigger than me and he had the advantage. He had a gun. My only thoughts were prayers to God that I would find a way out.
Kara was gone. As soon as Kara was taken, her family quickly alerted local law enforcement. Authorities wasted no time launching a massive search, with the FBI getting involved due to the severity of the abduction. Every minute counted, and the pressure was mounting. They began piecing together Kara's last known whereabouts. But despite the quick response, leads were scarce.
I tried to pay attention to where he was going, that way I would know where I was. And I felt him get on the interstate. He drove for maybe 10, 15 minutes before he stopped. And when he stopped, he opened the container and I could see just kind of he'd pulled over off the side of the road where maybe there were some trees or something. And that was the first time that he spoke to me and he said, I'm gonna tie you up and I'm gonna gag you. He did remind me that he had a gun.
Witnesses reported seeing a suspicious blue van in the area, but their descriptions were vague. The authorities faced a daunting challenge: few leads, no solid suspects, and an entire community paralyzed by fear. As the hours turned into days, many feared Kara might never be found alive.
He restrained my wrists and my ankles and then gagged me. And then he actually put the lid all the way on at that point. And then he drove for a couple more minutes. And he parked and he said, I'm gonna get out of the car and I'm gonna take you out and I don't want you to scream. So he got out of the car for a second and I could hear like outside noises, people moving around. And for some reason my brain went to like a gas station. I thought for some reason he was going to rob a gas station. And then he came back and that was when he actually carried the container over to, I felt him carry it and then set it down and then he drug it. And at that point I could tell that he drug it over concrete, the texture, and I could feel him drag over a threshold and the sound changed and then he shut the door.
But Kara was no ordinary victim. Even in the most dire of circumstances, she stayed alert, thinking of every possible way to escape.
I was, trying to read his mail. I was looking at the magnets on his refrigerator and I knew who his doctor was, I knew who his dentist was, and I knew, the serial number from the inside of the Rubbermaid container. Because I knew that I was going to escape, I wanted to learn about him. So I did try to have some conversation with him. He had some lizards and some fish and asked him about those. I got him on the topic of he was in the military and found out that he was discharged from the Navy. He asked me a bunch of questions and was writing down the answers. My name and whose house I was at and if I had any previous sexual experience, if I had a boyfriend, and wrote it all down. People don't kidnap young girls and not sexually assault them. It's just not. So I knew that was coming. At one point he said, we're gonna watch the news and we're gonna see if you're on the news. Let's see if anyone misses you. And I had been kidnapped 8 hours earlier, so of course, I wasn't on the news at that point. He's like, well, nobody misses you. Continually, he told me that he was going to let me go, and he said, and then it's your choice what you do. He said, you can go to the police and you can always be the girl who was raped. And so it always kind of stuck in my mind that there was going to be this stigma attached to me. From then on, I was going to be the girl who was kidnapped, the girl who was raped. There was one point that I definitely lost it and had a panic attack. He told me he had to go make a phone call, and at that point he put me back into the container and he said, you've been good so far, basically, so if you promise that you're not going to scream, I won't gag you or anything. And he put me in there, and at that point the lid was mostly on, but I started to basically hyperventilate, have a panic attack. He came back in there and he said, what's the problem? And I said, I can't breathe. And he said, okay, well, I'll leave the lid open as long as you don't make any noise. And he did. And then he went back and continued his phone call. He was calling his wife. You're gonna be here a couple days, so at some point you're going to have to eat. And he made me smoke marijuana with him and he gave me a Valium.
After being held captive for 18 long hours, Kara did something incredible.
He put handcuffs on my wrists and he had a rope coming up from the bed frame, and on the end of the rope there was one of those C-clamps, and so that was attached to my handcuffs. So my hands were kind of up here, and then I had a restraint on my right leg which was attached to the bottom of the bed frame there. And then he was just kind of okay, we're gonna go to sleep. I woke up the next morning and he was still asleep, and I knew that was it, that was the time.
She seized an opportunity and managed to escape her captor's grip.
I woke up before the sun even, and I heard him still sleeping. And I sort of knew when he was sleeping was going to be the most feasible time. My hands were kind of up here. And so the first thing that I did is I tried to kind of reach my hand to unscrew that C-clasp, and I couldn't quite do it. So there was just enough room that I could kind of get it to my mouth, and I used my teeth to unscrew it. I still had my hands in handcuffs. And then I was able to kind of slowly wiggle down to my ankle enough to unattach that from the bed. And then I just kind of slid out of bed and without waking him up. It was metal, and so that's a noisy door. And there was stuff kind of the vacuum cleaner, and the Rubbermaid container was also right there in the little foyer area. I pushed the vacuum in and unlocked the door, and I knew that door was going to make noise whenever I closed that accordion door. So basically in one motion I closed the door and opened the other one, and His bedroom window looked out onto the front door, basically. So I just knew he was gonna wake up when he heard that, and I knew he was gonna be able to see me. So I just did it as fast as I could, and I ran. I just thought for some reason he was going to wake up and he was gonna shoot me through the window, but I was out. I ran out in front of the car and waved my arms and stopped them and went to the driver and said I was just kidnapped. I just came from that apartment and I turned and pointed to it. It was the guy in that apartment right there, so remember it. I said, take me to the police department.
Despite being shaken and terrified, Kara remembered key details about her abductor, his face, his van, even the items in the room where she was held.
The most emotional part was whenever they called her. They said, we have your daughter, and I could hear her over the phone. I could hear her say, Kara, you have Kara? And that was one of the most emotional moments for me. The deputy that was there, I felt he did not believe anything that I was saying. Investigator said, we're gonna put you in the car real quick and we're gonna head over to the apartments and we're gonna see if we can find this guy. And I said, you know, the guys that brought me in, I showed them what apartment, and of course they were in shock. So we went back to the apartment complex. We were trying to identify it. I was like, I'm not gonna remember, because I had crammed so much information in my brain at this point.
Her bravery and clear-headedness under extreme duress would soon prove invaluable to the investigation.
There was a woman living there. I knew that she had red hair, you know, because I saw the long red hair and the hairbrush. So whenever we were able to go back to the apartment complex and I wasn't able to point out the specific apartment, there was, you know, like a property manager riding around on a golf cart, and so the investigator stopped him and said, this is the information that we have. Do you know what apartment it is? And the apartment manager was like, yep, I know exactly what apartment that is.
Kara's escape reignited the investigation. With her detailed recollections, law enforcement quickly zeroed in on a suspect.
It was his apartment that he shared with his wife. He'd woken up and realized that he had to get out of there.
Frederick James McFadden. His name had surfaced before in connection with other disturbing cases, but nothing had ever stuck. Until now.
We had not heard of Richard Evonitz. He was not on our radar at all. We began to gather information about where he worked. We got some cellular telephone records, different cars he had access to.
As investigators delved deeper, they uncovered a disturbing pattern. McFadden had a long history of violence.
One of the things in that footlocker was a newspaper from Spotsylvania, Virginia, and the headline was that these two sisters' bodies had been located in a river there. And that was pretty telling based on the circumstances involving Kara, him having that newspaper.
He had slipped through the cracks for years, evading justice time and time again. But this time, thanks to Kara's bravery, the net was closing in.
The incident with Kara, he chose that particular time because his wife and his mother had left to go to Disney World.
The police found irrefutable evidence linking him to Kara's abduction. The blue van, the items in his possession, all pointed directly to McFadden. But even as the pieces fell into place, the case was far from over.
During that meeting, a sister wanted to speak to the detectives privately, and she was able to give us significant information about where Evonitz was. He had reached out to her. She indicated he was in a motel about 40 minutes away. So we immediately dispatched a team. I went to that location myself, and we ultimately hit the room, and he was gone.
In the end, McFadden never saw the inside of a courtroom. When the police closed in, his desperation exploded into a reckless high-speed chase.
Basically had a serial killer on the loose at this point in time. We had a dangerous individual. We believed he was armed. I received word that his phone was in the Jacksonville, Florida area, so we knew he was heading south.
It was chaos, lights flashing, sirens wailing, tires screaming against the asphalt. But the chase ended just as quickly as it began. Trapped, cornered, McFadden made his final, brutal decision.
We received word that he had been stopped in Sarasota, Florida, not comply with police commands. A K-9 was sent to the car.
With no way out, he raised his gun and shot himself in the mouth. His life ended in a single, violent moment, leaving a void where justice should have been. For Kara, it wasn't over.
I was just kind of mad that he sort of got the easy way out.
She had imagined facing him in the courtroom, looking him in the eye and saying the words that had echoed in her mind since that night. You picked the wrong girl.
I wanted to have my day in court across from him. I wanted him to look at me across a courtroom and know that choosing me, that was his biggest mistake.
But that moment would never come. And though McFadden was gone, the scars he left behind would remain, unhealed and unresolved. Justice wasn't served, at least not in the way Kara had hoped. Kara's courage didn't just save her life, It brought justice to a dangerous criminal and served as a reminder of the strength of the human spirit. Cara Robinson's disappearance and heroic escape is a story that goes beyond abduction. It's a tale of resilience, bravery, and the power of one person's will to survive. Her case, though closed, serves as a stark reminder of the dangers we face and the importance of community awareness. Cara's story urges us to stay vigilant, to be aware of our surroundings, and to support victims of violence. Her courage not only saved her life, but also changed how many view the fight for survival. What do you think about Cara's story? Have you heard of other abduction cases that left a lasting impression? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to hear more stories of survival, courage, and mystery, make sure to subscribe and check out our next gripping case.